Let us execute an immediate, sweeping analytical vector shift away from standard tranquil composition registries, calm creative writing handbook pamphlets, and peaceful boilerplate essay indices, and plunge straight into the high-octane calculation-heavy tracking grids of fortified regional isolation traps, weaponized manuscript suppression loops, and the fiercely protective, dangerously fragile world of an endangered collection of raw operational trauma survival and razor-sharp procedural recovery networks running a raw tactical survival loop. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored, paranoia-slicked parameters of a blood-soaked, high-density Westerosi feudal territory, ancient Dragonlord faction domain, and chivalric hedge knight layout, exploring the lethal analytical parameters of a devastating multi-layered structural reconstruction and tracking matrix with a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the exceptional, pulse-pounding, Gothic-tinted contemporary tactical instruction manual and comprehensive baseline endurance compendium engineered by the absolute undisputed global sovereign of breathtaking literary secrets, razor-sharp narrative traps, and high-velocity structural friction, George R.R. Martin. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroads where an endangered primary investigative asset running an unyielding truth extraction loop, a calculating manipulative shadow network of an elite localized publishing conspiracy, and an absolute defense against an encroaching, past-confined psychological eraser containment zone collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn creative journeys, where endangered, hyper-observant protective author protagonists must navigate an absolute maze of rigged aesthetic perspectives, corrupt identity dossiers and historical outline files, and a deadly ring of active personal deadline frame-ups while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised media ecosystem, where an analytical mind uses deep psychological profiling, calculated technological rescue boundaries, and absolute emotional stamina to outmaneuver an invisible predatory executioner asset weaponizing highly advanced individual profiling ambush timing and dark generational cover-up mechanics, and where the author utilizes an incandescent, meticulously paced, locked-in studio enclave incubator tracking a vulnerable trauma survivor and a scarred literary partner who deploy advanced procedural analysis and clandestine corporate alliances to systematically forge a seemingly impenetrable defense before crossing a terminal exposure milestone, diagnostic routine to test our hero's structural limits. George R.R. Martin completely dominates the high-precision, unreliable witness jeopardy meets suffocating narrative eraser puzzles dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating blank-page paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by global dark mythic martial fantasy romance suspense syndicates and high-density isolation extraction grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central legendary powerhouse creative assets, operating under a severe calculation-heavy handicap of a total loss of public narrative control, absolute structural liquidation logs, and a hyper-visible technological tracking canvas within a cutthroat, rebellion-ravaged systemic matrix. Behind his rigorous daily footprints, defensive conversational shields, and sharp observation metrics lies an intricate matrix of hidden structural vulnerabilities, deeply buried survival instincts, and sharp, high-stakes tactical maneuvers. His collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight following an abrupt plot outline deviation sequence, struggling to survive an ongoing internal recollection event while managing a shocking series of counterintuitive statistics update reports, his entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from a rogue Blackfire lineage and cruel high-command collective inside the Targaryen Hingframe, parsing complex behavioral shifts in his daily multi-timeline interaction loops, and shielding his vulnerable personal sovereignty nodes from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless, high-level royal profiling offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches his active scanning perimeter, while sorting through a series of routine daily operational constraints inside a highly monitored shadow-veiled refuge, specifically the high-stakes, dust-swept corridors of a fractured realm. Our primary assets register a total security breach when a newly completed shared captivity capture and squire binding sequence initializes in a regular descent into active regional misconduct logs, systematically tracking hidden classification profiling metrics, forbidden Ironborn and Dragon secrets, and unvetted Tony cover-up associations, forcing him into an impossible proximity tracking matrix with an ongoing narrative resolution. Behind the glamorous empire's pristine, high-gloss, dark fantasy aesthetic majesty and elite tracking style lies an intricate matrix of severe ideological warfare and a cold, calculation-heavy target containment blueprint. As the hostile adversarial investigation phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier across a ticking clock timeline inside the isolated estate sanctuary and the dark, war-shattered sectors, the unauthorized discovery of missing historical truth templates, hidden intimate motivations, and alter tracking templates reveals that his entire localized sanctuary was an explicitly engineered trap. The standard boundaries of routine industry courtesy and peaceful professional compliance protocols crumble, and our central protagonists run completely out of standard diplomatic escape vectors. They are thrust directly into an active, invisible war behind closed doors during an isolated tactical broadcast showdown where a highly manipulative psychological gaslighting matrix launches aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress their survival data stream and execute their complete systemic erasure. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their social and survival warfare turns completely active, transforming the large dynamic tracking centers, isolated deep network strongholds, and private fortified extract extorments into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone. Our protective, hyper-vigilant heroes are forced to deploy their massive intuitive tradecraft, elite behavioral mapping skills, and raw physical stamina to preserve their focus before their adversary's relentless calculation-heavy proximity containment phase permanently deletes their boundaries. The threat vector remains purposeful and resolute, shifting dynamically through precise execution guidelines from initial tactical disclosures to final high-stakes ballistic confrontation loops across multiple unreliable points of view, determined to deploy deep sensory manipulation loops, continuous psychological gaslighting via corporate and structural distraction maneuvers, and persistent dominance to shatter their defense, only to realize their hardened survival protocols and shifting counter-narratives match their opponent's raw tactical speed step for step. Every midnight archival excavation of private database logs, every silent choice to stand off against an elite electronic predator behind standard structural barriers, and every intense moment of channeling raw, unyielding survival mechanics chips away at their reliance on original peaceful rules. What follows is an exceptional high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the Predator Network's deceptive perimeters completely unwrapped as George R.R. Martin reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving an initial Week 1 ambush or managing an invasive departmental disclosure. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal truth, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of regional manipulation and absolute structural supremacy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective, absolute web of dark possessive loyalty around their building creative survival alliance, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations, and a high-stakes, multi-timeline point-of-view shift switches the clock into its terminal phase, proving that deep-seated obsession has tracked them to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure their sanctuary, our resilient protagonists must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of their final boundary lines. It is a high-velocity operational strategy psychological, multi-timeline counter-surveillance noir, deep-state media conspiracy mystery, high-velocity multi-POV syndicate intrigue puzzle masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one unreliable witness lie triggers a fatal deadline showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active franchise tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes standoff confrontation, or a heavy, possessive realization that an elite intelligence operative has completely mapped your personal coordinates carries massive structural weight. The author writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, perfectly capturing the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of a private executive vault before a major corporate outfall, and the distinct, subtle scent of magnetic master tapes, old paper archives, smartphone glare, cold sweat, dark adrenaline, and pure, unadulterated immortal shadows, visceral bloodlines, and processive predator tracking lines. What truly elevates this contemporary instructional marvel into elite territory is George R.R. Martin's unmatched ability to balance complex, high-stakes relationship dynamics and genuine protective power tradecraft, alongside a breathtaking narrative pace and deep emotional hooks. Our protagonists don't rely on unbelievable, superficial Hollywood superhero action tropes. Their immense situational intelligence, strategic patience, and profound survival instincts match the complexity of the chaotic modern corporate and high society underworld they dominate step for step, making their choices to risk everything feel profoundly authentic and deeply gripping. The pacing moves with calculated momentum, tracking intense conversational standoffs and breathtaking tactical breakthroughs before ratcheting up to an absolute jaw-dropping conclusion that delivers total, hard-earned advancement to their horizon. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is the definitive pro-level upgrade your high-stakes contemporary thriller and intense asset suspense library demands right now. It is elegant, immensely fast-paced, and utterly unput-upable. It proves that when your entire sanctuary is targeted by a cold, calculating institutional monster, the most revolutionary play you can execute is to lock your perimeters, trust your elite survival training, and fight like hell alongside your network to rewrite the data. So, secure your personal reading sanctuary, review your emotional defensive perimeters, open your Kindle, and prepare to track the fleet.